entirety than all.
To each of you for taking time out of your day. I'm looking at the chat, seeing who all is here from all different parts, mostly at this point from New York. Wonderful. While I am pulling up, I'm going to share my screen real quick, but while I'm doing that, I'm going to ask once again for some volunteers who are willing to unmute during our German lesson. For the entirety of the German lesson. I can tell you already that even if you're muted, I'm going to ask very heartily that you actively participate. It's the active participation in the lesson that helps us to really simulate and walk in the shoes of our students. So just as we ask our students to actively participate, I'm going to ask that you do. Most of us will be muted, but I am asking for about 10 of us to be unmuted. That's going to allow for me to be able to interact with you, right? And also, if you are willing to volunteer and unmute, you can indicate that in the chat. And I think Monica's going to kind of see who all might be volunteering, up to about 10 or 12. And then you will, I want to assure you, you will not be asked to do anything individually in German. It's all choral. It's really fun. We laugh, we have a good time, and you're not going to be put on the spot. So I want to lower that affective filter right from the start and let you know exactly what it is you're getting yourself into. The German lesson lasts maybe about 10 minutes. So it's only about 10 minutes of your time that you would be asked to play this particular voluntary role. So while you're still pondering whether you're willing to do that and typing into the chat where you're from and what your roles are, I'm going to get us started. So thanks again. I am coming at you from Austin, Texas. So I'm sure our weather's a little bit warmer than yours, and still I'm cold because it's still winter here. But today we're going to be taking a walk in the shoes of our language learners. And I say language learners because it could be English learners in an ESL classroom, but it could be also emergent bilingual students in any type of a transitional bilingual or even a dual language program, right? So just getting this language experience, the integrated language and content, language immersion experience. And we're going to do it through a simulated science lesson in German. And really, if you don't know any German at all or don't know much German, that's probably ideal. Although if you know some German, that's great too. You're welcome, welcome, welcome to be here. So I'm excited about it. I hope you are as well. And I'm going to get us kind of started. Thank you for that nice introduction. I'm not going to repeat too much of it. The only thing I want here to point out is if you're a dual language educator, you're going to notice up on the upper right-hand corner that publication that I had the honor of being a co-author of. And that is for free. That's available for free online. If you Google or search using whatever search engine you wish, Guiding Principles for Dual Language Education, you start typing that in, you're going to find a link to the Center for Applied Linguistics, nonprofit organization I worked for 4 years. They house this. It can be purchased as a book, but it also can be downloaded as a free PDF. So if you're a dual language educator or if you're interested in learning more about dual language education, that publication is used across the United States and across the world. It really is an incredible volume, and I pinch myself still to know that I was part of the author team for the third edition that came out in 2018. So free resource. If you aren't sure you need it, but you've got friends who might, just make sure you download that free resource full of research and rubrics for best practices. The other publication on the right is only available for purchase, has really great information about dual language education. So as you can tell already, although I have served as a German instructor, an ESL instructor, a transitional bilingual instructor, and also dual language instructor, my passion is really dual language education at this time. But I'm all about multilingual education. I've been a state director as well, and I'm a researcher and author. So that's enough about me for sure. And I do have my company now is called Global Lingo. So I really work hard with language educators across the country on programmatic design, implementation, professional development for leaders and for teachers. All that being said, let's see what we're up to today. So today you're going to actively participate in our simulated science lesson. And yes, it will be delivered not only in German, but virtually in German. And I'm gonna say right now, I used to do this only face-to-face. Along comes the pandemic. And just like each of you in your classrooms, we had to move to virtual, and it was pretty scary, okay? So I know it's tough. It's tough to teach language learners face-to-face, and it's even more challenging to teach language learners grade level content in a virtual environment. So we get to do it ourselves today and kind of see how it feels from the learner perspective. After we do the simulated science lesson, you're going to go into breakout rooms and we're going to just randomly group you. And you'll get a chance to brainstorm two things. You're going to identify teacher techniques as well as language learner strategies that you experienced during that science lesson in German. Okay, and those teacher techniques and language learner strategies together form an effective and productive teaching and learning partnership. So I think it's going to be kind of an interesting and different way to view language teaching and language learning. And I think you'll really enjoy your work with colleagues from across the state and maybe across the country. So I'm going to pause there. Monica, are there any questions or any comments or anything like that that we want to?
I don't think so. We have 5 volunteers so far.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you to the 5 already. And we would love to have 5 more. So feel free, others of you, to volunteer to unmute in a few minutes. You're still going to have some time to think about whether you've got it in you today to volunteer. Wonderful. So when we're doing the simulated lesson in German that we're about to begin, a couple things you're going to want to know about what to do during this lesson. So during the lesson, here I am, I'm teaching. I'm going to ask that you put me into speaker view. In other words, you're going to want to see me somewhere on your screen because I'm going to be doing gestures and other things, as I'm sure each of you does in your teaching. And it's important that you can see that. Also, I'm going to ask that you participate actively, whether it's with your mic on or off. Still, please use all of your active participation skills. But don't worry about taking notes during the lesson. That would be distracting, actually, right? This is all about the experience. So just get into the experience, get a little goofy with it, and participate actively. What does the active participation look like? Well, of course, I'm going to be asking you sometimes to just listen, right? And so I'll say, zuhören, zuhören, zuhören. And you can see I'm using some gestures. I bet you can guess what that means, right? Listen. And then I'll also be asking you to repeat. And I'll say alle, alle, alle. And I just want to hear. And again, it'll be choral, right? You guys, it'll be a bunch of voices. So for those volunteers out there who are going to volunteer to unmute your mic, don't worry. You're going to be with a group of others trying out this German. So we'll have zuhören, and then we'll have alle. So we'll do both receptive learning and active productive language learning. Bravo for you guys. I'll be doing gestures, and I'll be encouraging you to do those gestures as well, even if your mic is off. And then I really want you to have fun, okay? I know how tiring school is right now and how tired you might be. So feel free to stand up and move around while this is happening. I'm going to stop again, see if there's any questions or comments in the chat that we need to or would like to address.
I think Brianna, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
Yeah, I have literally been looking for professional development like this as long as I've been an ENL teacher, and I have been a New York State certified TESOL instructor since 2013. So over 7 years.
Wow.
I have actually looked very actively online and have never seen anything close. And honestly, the reason I wanted something like this isn't for me. It's for all my colleagues who have zero understanding of what our kids need. And I hope that I'll be able to take something away and be like, listen, this is why I tell you to do all these things, because I struggled in German for 20 minutes and I can only imagine what these kids go through, 8 hours a day. So I, all of my prayers were answered when I saw this on the New York State TESOL website. So I'm very excited, and thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Thank you, Brianna. I'm glad to hear that. I'm excited to hear that. So that means you're going to volunteer, right? Are you one of our volunteers?
Yeah.
Thank you. Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing afterwards, again, how you felt about how it went. It really is about the experience, and it's an experience that really you have to have in order, you learn a lot just through the experience. So thank you for that. All right, so while you're participating in the lesson, doing all these things, there's two things I'd like you to pay attention to in the background of your mind, okay? One of them, of course, as you can tell maybe from the objectives, is the teacher techniques that are helping you to understand the lesson. So just, you don't have to write anything down again, but just be noticing like, oh, you'll feel it. Oh, that's helping. Oh, that's helping. Oh, that's helping. And then besides the teacher techniques, the other thing I want you to do is practice some metacognition and meta-linguistic awareness by trying to be aware of any learner strategies that you're using to be successful in the lesson. And those learner strategies could be physical behaviors, but they could also be cognitive, thoughts, or they could even be feelings that you're experiencing during the lesson, okay? So all these different experiences, it's really helpful to become a little more aware of them. What we're gonna do after the lesson, you'll be able to go into breakout rooms, and what you're gonna do there is brainstorm together the teacher techniques, and our recorder in your group will list them, and then learner strategies that you all kind of pool together. So that's what your breakout room conversation will be all about. And then we'll come back together and kind of share, compare and contrast all of that and come up with some conclusions. All right, so we kind of know where we're at and where we're headed. Now we get to fasten our seatbelts and have the fun ride of our lifetime. And we've got Brianna, who's I know gonna volunteer for us and unmic, so you can go ahead and unmic. And I think Monica, I kind of twisted her arm also. And then whoever else has volunteered, please do unmute your mics now and get ready for the fun. And Monica, can you just tell me approximately how many people are gonna be unmuted for us?
I think 9 or 10.
Oh, you are a wonderful group. That's great. Everyone else who's not going to be unmuted, first of all, let's give a round of applause to those brave souls. Okay. Now, I appreciate it. We all do. And then if you're still going to be muted, just remember, you're still going to do this, right? If somebody is at home, you got a child or somebody, bring them over to the computer. They can participate as well. Okay. This is your free German lesson for the day. All right. Any questions before we head off on our lesson? Everyone good? You've got me on the speaker view? Okay, and I'm going to try to get my gestures so you can see them. Well, let's get going. Okay, was ist heute das Thema? Was ist heute das Thema? Das Thema heute ist der Wasserzyklus. Der Wasserzyklus. Der Wasserzyklus. Alle der Wasserzyklus.
Der Wasserzyklus.
Der Wasser.
Der Wasserzyklus.
Der
Wasserzyklus.
Gut. Der Wasserzyklus.
Der Wasser.
Der Wasserzyklus. Der Wasserzyklus.
Der Wasserzyklus.
Der
Wasserzyklus. Der Wasserzyklus.
Sehr gut, sehr gut. Das Thema heute ist der Wasserzyklus. Das Wasser, das Wasser, das Wasser,
Das Wasser.
Das Wasser.
sehr gut. Und der Zyklus. Der
Zyklus.
Der
Zyklus.
Sehr gut.
Der Zyklus.
Wir hören, das Wasser und der Zyklus macht das Wort der Wasserzyklus. Der Wasserzyklus.
Der Wasserzyklus. Der Wasserzyklus.
Ausgezeichnet, sehr gut. Das Thema heute ist alle der
Das
Wasser.
Thema heute
Der
ist
Wasserzyklus.
der Wasserzyklus.
Sehr gut, sehr gut. Das ist die Sonne. Die Sonne.
Die Sonne.
Die Sonne.
Die Sonne.
Die Sonne.
Die
Die
Sonne.
Sonne.
Das ist die Wolke. Die Wolke.
Die
Die
Wolke.
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 Die Wolke.
Die
Die
Wolke.
Wolke.
Die Wolke.
Sehr gut, sehr gut. Das ist die Kälte. Die
Die
Kälte.
Kälte.
Kälte. Kälte. Kälte.
Die Kälte.
Das ist die Wärme. Die Wärme.
Das ist die
Wärme.
Wärme.
Die
Wärme.
Die Wärme.
Die Wärme.
Wärme.
Alle? Was ist das?
Kälte.
Kälte.
Die Kälte.
Kälte.
Wärme.
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 Warmer.
Ausgezeichnet. Sehr gut. Das Wasser. Alle? Das Wasser.
Das Wasser.
Das Wasser. Das Wasser.
Das Wasser.
Und der Dampf.
Der Dampf.
Der
Der
Dampf.
Dampf. Der Dampf.
Der Dampfer.
Sehr
Der
gut.
Dampf.
Der Regen.
Der
Der
Regen.
Regen. Der
Der
Regen.
Regen.
Der Regen.
Der Fluss.
Der Fluss.
Der Fluss. Der Fluss.
Sehr
Der
gut.
Fluss.
Sehr, sehr gut. Was ist das Thema heute, alle? Das Thema heute ist der...
Der
Der Wasserzyklus.
Sehr
Der
gut.
Der
Wasserzyklus.
Wasserzyklus.
Der Wasserzyklus.
Hören, zuhören. Das Thema heute ist der Wasserzyklus. Der Wasserzyklus,
Wasserzyklus.
sehr gut. Der Wasserzyklus ist ein zyklischer Prozess. Der Wasserzyklus ist ein zyklislischer Prozess.
Der Wasserzyklus ist ein
Prozess.
zyklischer Prozess.
Like
Zuhören. Der Wasserzyklus hat 4 Phasen. 1, 2, 3, 4. Der Wasserzyklus hat 4 Phasen.
4 Phasen.
4 Phasen.
Der Wasserzyklus
Phasen.
Vier
hat
Phasen.
4 Phasen.
Die zuhören. Die erste Phase ist die Verdampfung. Die zweite Phase
Die
Die
Dampfer.
Verdampfung.
die Verdampfung.
Die
Die
Verdampfung.
Verdampfung.
Die zweite
Seriously.
Phase ist die Kondensation. Die Kondensation. Alle?
Die
Kondensation. Die Kondensation.
Die Konzentration.
Sehr gut. Die dritte Phase ist der Niederschlag. Der Niederschlag.
Der dritte Phase
Niederschlag.
ist der Niederschlag. Niederschlag.
Niederschlag.
Niederschlag.
Die vierte Phase ist der Abfluss. Der Abfluss. Alle?
Der Abfluss.
Der Abfluss. Der
Der
Abfluss.
Abfluss.
Der Abschluss.
Abfluss.
Der Abfluss.
Sehr gut. Das Thema heute ist der, was alle?
Der
Wasserzyklus.
Wasserzyklus.
Der Wasserzyklus.
Der Wasserzyklus.
Der Wasserzyklus.
Der
Der
Wasserzyklus.
Wasserzyklus.
Zuhören, sehr gut. Der Wasserzyklus ist ein zyklischer Prozess. Das hat 4 Phasen. Die erste Phase ist die Verdampfung. Ja, die Verdampfung ist die erste Phase. Das beginnt mit der Sonne. Die Sonne produziert die Wärme. Ja,
Die Sonne produziert die Wärme.
die Wärme. Sehr gut.
Die Sonne produziert die
Die
Wärme.
Sonne produziert die Wärme.
Die Sonne produziert die Wärme.
Gut. Zuhören. Die Wärme trifft das Wasser.
Die Wärme.
Die Wärme.
Wärme. Die Wärme.
Die Wärme.
Das produziert Dampf.
Produziert Dampf.
Die Wärme produziert
Dampf.
Die Wärme
der Dampf.
Produziert Dampf.
und das
Die Wärme produziert Dampf,
Die
der Dampf.
Wärme produziert
Wärme
der Dampf.
produziert der Dampf.
Und das
Was
ist
ist Dampf?
Dampf.
Dampf.
Oh,
Dampf.
okay, thanks.
Ja, die Wärme trifft das Wasser und das produziert der
Yeah.
Dampf. Und das ist die erste Phase, die Verdampfung. Alle die Verdampfung.
Die Verdampfung.
Verdampfung.
Die Verdampfung.
Die
Die Verdampfung.
Sehr gut. Das ist die erste Phase. Jetzt zuhören, zuhören. Die zweite Phase. Die zweite Phase.
Die zweite Phase. Die zweite Phase.
Das
Die
ist die
zweite-
Kondensation. Die
Die
Kondensation.
Kondensation. Die Kondensation. Die Kondensation.
Sensation.
Die Kondensation.
Sehr
Die
gut.
Kondensation.
Ausgezeichnet. Zuhören, zuhören. Die Kondensation. Die Kondensation
Kondensation.
beginnt mit der Dampf. Ja? Der Dampf geht hoch auf den Himmel und das produziert die Wolke. Der Dampf geht
Der
hoch,
Dampf.
ja? Und das produziert die Wolke. Die
Und das produziert die Wolke.
mit dem Dampf, ja? Wolke ist
Der Dampf produziert die Wolke.
Der Dampf produziert die Wolke.
sehr gut, sehr gut. Und
Der
das
Dampf produziert die Wolke.
Die Wolke.
Produziert die Wolke.
ist ausgezeichnet, sehr gut. Die erste Phase ist, was alle? Die erste Phase ist,
Kondensation.
die erste
Oh,
Phase.
erst Verdampfung.
Verdampfung. Die erste Phase.
Verdampfung.
Sehr gut. Das beginnt mit der Sonne. Die Sonne produziert was?
Die Wolke.
Die Wolke.
Die Sonne.
Die Wärme.
Die Sonne produziert die
Die
Wärme.
Wärme.
Sehr
Die
gut.
Sonne
Die Sonne
produziert
produziert
die
die
Wärme.
Wärme
Die Wärme.
und die Wärme trifft das Wasser und was passiert?
Der Dampf.
Der Dampf.
Das Wasser
Der Dampf.
Sehr gut.
produziert der Dampf.
Sehr gut, sehr gut. Die zweite Phase beginnt mit der Dampf. Der Dampf geht hoch und was wird produziert?
Die Wolke.
Die Wolke.
Die Wolke.
Und das ist die zweite Phase, die Kondensation. Alle? Die
Die
Kondensation. Die
Die
Kondensation.
Kondensation. Die Kondensation.
Sehr gut. Jetzt machen wir eine Pause. Eine Pause. Eine Frage. Alle? Was ist heute das Thema? Die Sonne, der Wasserzyklus oder die Phasen? Was ist heute das Thema, Anne?
Die Wasser.
Der Wasserzyklus. Der Wasserzyklus.
Sehr gut. Das Thema heute ist der Wasserzyklus. Ausgezeichnet. Nummer 2. Wie viele Phasen hat der Wasserzyklus? 1, 2, 3 oder 4? Wie viele Phasen?
4.
Vier Phasen.
Vier.
Sehr gut, sehr
Vier.
gut. Sie sind sehr intelligent. Sie sind sehr, sehr ausgezeichnet. Nummer 3. Was wird durch die Sonne produziert? Die Wärme oder die Kälte? Was wird durch
Die Wärme.
Die Wärme. Die Wärme.
Die Wärme?
Die
Sehr
Wärme.
gut. Ausgezeichnet. Und Nummer 4. Was wird durch die Verdampfung produziert? Was wird durch
Der
die
Dampf.
Verdampfung? Oh,
Der Dampf.
sehr gut. Das Wasser, der Dampf oder die Kälte, Sie wissen, ja? Alle?
Dampf.
Der
Der
Dampf.
Dampf.
Der Dampf.
Der
Der Dampf.
Der Dampf.
Ausgezeichnet. Sehr gut. Und was wird durch die Kondensation produziert?
Die Wolke.
Die Wolke.
Die Wolke. Die Wolke.
Die
Die Wolke.
Die Wolke. Ausgezeichnet. Sehr, sehr gut. Thank you first off to all of you wonderful volunteers. Our trip is over. You guys were incredibly interactive. Thank you so much. Maybe some of us feel a little tired. Type into the chat box real quick, just a feeling or two you feel right now, having completed that lesson. Just type in any type of a word describing how you feel. And Monica, I'm gonna ask you, because for some reason my chat won't show what they're typing, unfortunately. What are you seeing, Monica?
Oh, okay. Relieved, enlightened, fascinated, satisfied, excited, tired, and a little overwhelmed. Fun, it stretched my brain. Excited, someone connected to their father's background. Cognitively tired, challenging, tired, busy. So we've got all different kinds of feelings.
Yes. Thank you for that. And so maybe now we can, as we walk through the shoes of our students, we can see that in 10 minutes of this instruction, there's a lot that we have invested and also a lot that we feel, right? And imagine if this was extended over 20 minutes or 30 or an hour or 2 hours or a full day, right? So it's helpful for us to kind of see the energy that's required of active language learners. That helps us to think about balancing our instruction with this input we're providing and then giving breaks for processing, etc. Right? That being said, I'm going to ask you to take a quick poll. You're going to see a poll get launched in a moment. And it is going to ask you 3 quick questions, super quick. How much German did you know prior to today's lesson? And then about how much of the German lesson were you able to understand? We're thinking here of receptive, just understanding. About how much of it could you understand by the end of that lesson? And then the third question, about what percentage of the vocabulary from the lesson could you translate from German into English? So if I gave you that graphic organizer with all that German on it, how many of those words approximately do you think you might be able to find and write down an English equivalent for? So those are and that's more productive language, okay? So I'm gonna launch real quick this poll, and we're just gonna kind of see where everyone's at after this lesson. At this time, you should see that poll and just be approximate in your responses, of course. Oh yeah, the polls are coming in. Thank you. A few more seconds. %80 of you have voted, so we'll wait just a few more seconds, see if we can get a few more people's polls in.
And while that's happening, I just wanted to let you know in the chat, there was a comment that let's recall that this process is different for adults with CALP versus a child whose CALP is just initially developing cognitive academic language proficiency, and that it would be even more exhausting for youngsters. That was one comment. And then another comment was these answers are also based on having a lot of content knowledge.
Yes, and we'll talk more about that later. Thank you for both of those. All right, I'm going to give 10 more seconds and then we'll share these results. All right, thank you to each of you for responding. Let's share those results and see what we found. Awesome, so hopefully you can see these results. The first question about how much German you knew, 53% of you did not know any German, so congratulations on surviving, wonderful. 42% of you knew a little bit. So that's all but 5% of you didn't know any German or much German at all. And then there's 5% of you out there with basic fluency. So we can tell, and I did gauge this lesson for mostly beginners without knowing who would be here today. So wonderful. That being said, mostly all beginners, let's see how much of it you were able to understand. So I'm happy that none of you didn't understand any of it. That would make me sad if that had happened, but it does occasionally happen because it's hard work to understand a lesson. But 21% of you understood about 20% or less than. A third of you understood about a third of the lesson. And then half, 13%. What I find pretty exciting is that almost 20% of you understood about 75% of the lesson, and then another 16% understood almost 100%. So in other words, we can see that those of us, we all had different ways of accessing the lesson, but we were able to understand some, most, or even all of the lesson. And this depends on a number of different factors, right? Not just your German proficiency, but perhaps other factors as well that you can revisit later when you talk about learner strategies, okay? Just kind of planting that seed, why some people are able to understand more than others, even if everybody had, or most of us had no German experience previously. So thank you for that. I'm glad that there was understanding at different levels. And then productive skills. How much of it could you kind of translate over to English? And again, we can see a full 20% of you could almost translate all of those words, and another third, 75%. And then we break down into kind of even groups for the half, less than half, etc. So that's actually, when you consider we only had 10 minutes in this virtual lesson, that's actually pretty darn good results. So I'm thrilled with that. Thank you so much. I'm gonna stop sharing those results now and see if there's any comments or anything in the chat that we want to talk about before we move forward. Anything, Monica?
One comment, someone said that they are the ENL co-teacher in a living environment class, and they've also co-taught in other content areas. She wrote, one thing I have to teach my co-teachers is that students likely do not have prior knowledge about the content area. So it is not just a one-to-one translation.
Yes, that's that importance of connecting to experiences and background knowledge and building background knowledge as needed. Absolutely. And I didn't do that in this lesson well, I did a little bit with the vocabulary preview. This is like a snip of a lesson, but thank you. Those are definitely important comments for sure. So as we move forward, we're going to move into our breakout discussion, and you're going to be in a moment put into groups of about four per group. You are going to get a handout at the end of today's session, which is going to have a T-chart with lots and lots of teacher techniques on it and lots of learner strategies on it. But rather than just hand that to you and say, here you go, it's really helpful here to reflect on your own experience of that lesson. So remember how during the lesson you were kind of paying attention to what was helpful to you in terms of teacher techniques, and then also what was going on as a learner, your behaviors, your thoughts, your feelings. So this is going to be your chance to kind of just brainstorm with your group and list teacher techniques on the left side of a T-chart. And you can just take a piece of paper and fold it in half, create a T-chart, super easy. So teacher techniques, brainstorm and list, and then learner strategies, brainstorm and list. I do recommend you focus on one and then the other. It's just a helpful way to dig a little deeper than if we just kind of do it all at once. That's just an encouragement for you how to manage your time in your breakout room. In your breakout room, we're going to do this for about 10 minutes. I do encourage you to have a facilitator. That's just somebody who's going to try to make sure everyone gets is included, of course, right? Everyone's getting their voices heard. And then if you could maybe, I don't know about anyone else, but under COVID, my hair has grown incredibly long. So I'm going to say that the person in your group with the longest COVID hair is going to be your recorder and reporter. And so you'll find out who that is in your group, and that'll be the recorder and reporter. When we come back, we won't be able to have everyone report, but I do want people to unmute. So we'll look for volunteer reporters from the many groups. We'll have a few of you share out the teacher techniques and the learner strategies you found. Questions about what you're going to be doing in your group? You're going to have 10 minutes. You're going to have a recorder with the COVID hair. The other thing I want to recommend that you do real quick, I'm going to put the slide back to the, where is it? Sorry about the clicking. To the graphic organizer. Just take a picture if you would like. This is up to you. One of the downsides of Zoom is I can't really share a screen. So it's helpful sometimes in these conversations to have the visual that was provided. So if anyone in your group can take a photograph with your phone or whatever, or a screenshot of this, that way you can refer to it as you have your conversation in your breakout rooms. Okay.
And what was the T-chart on the left was the
Teacher techniques.
Okay.
And on the right is the learner strategies. Thank you for asking for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So any other questions before we head into those rooms for 10 minutes? All right, I think we're ready. Monica, will you be doing that or am I doing that?
Yep, I will launch the breakout rooms right now.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. There's some of us in the main room here who can't access the breakout room. I'm just kind of checking to see if you're all okay. If for some reason you're unable to access a breakout room, you can also remain in this room and unmute and see if there's others in that same situation. Hi, Jean. Did you not get into a room? Oops, you're on mute. I'm not sure why. You're on mute, Jean. You're on mute. Wonder if I can unmute you. There you go.
I'm muted. It must have gone back. That's what I'm trying to say. I missed everything until this moment.
Oh, well, welcome.
And having lived in Germany for nearly 20 years, I was very excited to hear a lesson taught in a lesson very near and dear to my heart.
Ah.
And was really interested to see how some lessons might go and how back into it.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Your sound is very broken on my end. I don't know if it's my. I think that our groups should be coming back soon. I'm seeing if Monica's.
May I ask you, have your doctoral degree in?
The breakout rooms are closing in 60 seconds. Everyone will be back. Everyone's starting to come back. That's not what I want. Welcome back, everybody. I think we're coming back slowly but surely. Welcome back. Are you all able to hear me okay? Because I'm hearing a lot of feedback. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome.
I think maybe if everyone can just mute themselves at the moment if you're not muted. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be great. And then we'll get people to unmute to share. Awesome. I'm going to get forward to our questions. All right. So yes, if you can mute if you're not going to be sharing out right now, that would help us because we're getting a little bit of feedback on our end. I want to thank you all for those conversations. I got to sit in on one. Which reporters would like to unmute? And this is just going to be a free for all on the, to report some of the teacher techniques that you all shared. Feel free to unmute and speak.
Our group had, we've noticed a few things. We talked about how the teacher used a lot of repetition. Your pace was, pretty slow. You used a lot of gestures and body language, had us repeating a lot of visuals. We really felt actively engaged.
Thank you, Alexis. Who else would like to add? Is there anything else you'd like to add on the teacher techniques?
Group mentioned the visuals, heavily relied on the visuals, economy of language, the gesturing, with supporting pictures. You pre-taught some vocab before diving into the cycle itself. There was some text the underlining and such, lots of positive reinforcement, and you prioritize communication over correct pronunciation.
Thank you, Kelly. Any other group have anything else to add?
We talked about a lot of those same things, and the positive feedback that even when you were telling us to listen or be quiet, you were doing it with a smile, and everything was very like friendly and happy. And also the multiple choice options in the quiz with the diagram there to look back at, and yeah, how you would circle things on the diagram when you were talking about it. And cognates were a part of it, and chunking, you know, it was a chunked lesson that really helped as well.
Thank you, Ms. Albrecht. Ms. Albrecht, you have a German name.
I do, but I don't know any German. It's too many generations back.
I hear you. Thank you for that. We have time for one more. Is there anyone else who wants to add anything to the teacher technique brainstorming list?
Our group listed a lot of those as well, and we also noted that there was a real not just economy of the written language and the spoken language, but also an economy of the graphics. Like you just weren't just slamming them with lots and lots and lots of pictures. You were using those same images over and over again and using that repetition in the images as well.
Thank you. And I think, Danielle, you also have possibly a German name.
Swedish, supposedly.
Yeah, the spelling. Yeah, I figured. Very good. Thank you. Thank you so much. And there may even have been more, but I do appreciate everything that you guys talked about, and especially how detailed you got in your observations and listing. I think that's great. I have a few things that I had just on this slide in terms of what the teacher does. Some of these will just reiterate what you said, so I'm not going to talk too much about them, but sometimes it's helpful to think about the student as being immersed, and then as all of the scaffolds as, you know, the life jacket and the goggles and the swim gear. So that's kind of a fun visual for sometimes for teachers or even for students to understand what it is that we as teachers are providing for them. So here's just a few lists, and a list, and I'm going to not read them out loud to you, but just let you sort of see. You touched on most of these. I do want to point out one or two things that I'm not sure how aware you were of them. One is that the picture and the pictures and words were together. And I tried to use animation to draw the eyes to whatever it was that I was saying out loud. There's actually a name for that, which is point and say. It's so simple, right? But it's something that to me is one of the easiest adjustments to at least our live face-to-face training. Once we start having to animate and put pointers in, it's more time consuming. But actually being sure we direct students' eyes to exactly what it is we're talking about, especially when we've got a lot of input coming, right? That's a really, really helpful scaffold. So making sure the picture and the word are together, and there's an indication of that through either animation, arrows, or a pointer if it were a live instruction. And then challenge. I don't know that you noticed, but in the German, I did use some actually pretty complex grammar, which because of the way that it was laid out, you probably couldn't even notice or tell, but we used passive voice, which is that is the voice of science, and it's more complicated in terms of grammar. So I'd like to just point out that we can introduce fairly complex grammar even to beginners if it is within a very clear context, and we do it in a way that makes sense. So things like der Dampf wird durch die Sonne produziert, or whatever. It's a passive voice. I won't go into too much detail there, but now I'm excited to hear about the learner strategies that you and your group talked about. So let's hear from some other reporters on this. Please unmute and share.
The visuals the whole time, and either our eyes were on the visuals or you gesturing, and really relied on that. We had to activate our as you mentioned, the visuals were linked with a word. Cognates was a big one, looking for those. and that you looking at those visuals during the question part, trying to match the words that were underlined to the pictures to be able to answer.
Thanks. Kelly, do you mind, do you remember one of the cognates?
I'm thinking of condensation or something like that.
Awesome. Yeah. And so how can you, how does that help you as a learner? Just talk us through that. I absolutely agree with you, but I think for some of us, it's helpful to hear a little more about how that works for the learner.
Not only does it sound the same, but it kind of has those same in the written form, like the TION that I'm familiar with from English. So I can already kind of figure out, okay, this is going to be a noun now instead of a verb, as long as that matches. So I can get a deeper sense of what we're talking about.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And those cognates, we might think that's automatic among students, but a lot of students need some basic instruction in recognizing cognates. And as Kelly said, cognates are words that may sound the same, but they also may look the same. Some words that look very similar don't really sound the same. Some words that sound very similar between two languages don't really look the same. So the helpful thing with cognates is to think about, and the question I ask students is when I'm teaching them about cognates is, oops, do any of the words look like or sound like words in your language? And if they do, would that word make sense, right? Do any of the words look like or sound like words in your language? If they do, plug it in, does it make sense? So that's just kind of a quick thing about that. Who else would like to share a report around strategies, learner strategies?
I'll add one that I think is missing in Zoom a lot, which is I've really realized this year how much students rely on cues from other students on what they should be doing or what we're supposed to be doing. And that's the huge part that's just often really reduced this year because there's no one else in the bedroom with them.
I so agree with you. There's so much that's missing. It's really hard. So the first thing I want to say is it is hard. And a lot of what, even with doing all these things, we're missing those things because they're impossible to reproduce virtually. And that is one of them, just peer feedback, looking at your friends. We all know, there's a ringer in the room, somebody who knows how to speak a little more German than we do, right? Or who just speaks loudly and clearly or whatever it is. So just as an example, or that I can whisper, hey, might that mean, vapor, right? I can ask, I can do quick questions. So absolutely, Danielle, thank you for sharing that. I'm gonna show you here some of the strategies students use in addition to what you guys shared. And I think the key here is to realize that these are strategies that effective language learners use, but that doesn't mean that all language learners use them. So we can teach these. That's one takeaway I want to make sure we understand is that with all the hard work we do as teachers, we want the students to put in their effort as well and to know how to be strategic language learners. That's going to make everyone more successful, and it's going to ease up on our workload, right? We're going to get higher yield for our work. So the student needs to be able to take risks. You guys did an amazing job of taking risks, right? And engaging in productive struggle. So you guys mentioned these things: look, listen, repeat, and move. That's very active. So students cannot be looking elsewhere. And in Zoom world or in virtual world, that's tough. Acknowledge that for sure. I like to use the word tracking because students, if we only look at the teacher or if we only look at the images or we only look at the words, we're missing out, right? It really is about the simultaneous processing of a lot of different clues. So I like to teach my students about tracking, that they really need to learn to sift back and forth, and also to be more aware of what's helpful to them. Because for some of us, the picture is the most helpful. For others, no, it's the word, right? And it could also depend on the content, whether it's the picture, the word, right? So teaching it as tracking and helping students sort of explore how to process all the input through these different strategies is really helpful. Many of you I've heard throughout the
afternoon talking about background knowledge, personal background knowledge and content background knowledge. And in this lesson, I knew who y'all were. Teachers, you're going to kind of know the water cycle, we're adults, so I kind of tuned it to us. I've done this same lesson on other content, like for kinder, I've done it on family, because the one thing we want to remember is young children process the language differently and have different background knowledge, but their content is also different, right? So every grade level, it's a little bit different how you do this, but you definitely want to connect. And we think about schema theory, right? About making sure we're building on something that they already know and expanding their schema. So there was a mention of the cognates. A lot of times if we already are proficient in 2 or more languages, then it's easier to learn a 3rd or a 4th language because we're used to doing all of these things. And because we've got more different languages to connect to, right? So that sometimes people will be like, how do you know so many languages? I'm like, well, honestly, it gets easier. The more you learn them, the easier it gets. At least not in terms of perfect fluency, but in terms of sort of navigating through. So those connections need to be made. I think this is a big one. Keep trying even when it's hard, right? It is going to be hard. You are going to make mistakes. We are going to mispronounce. We're not always going to understand everything, and that's okay. That's part of the learning process. So we have to learn to tolerate ambiguity and be okay with it, right? Whoops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to flip out of that. So all of these things, are really, really helpful to students. And even if we just explain to them, it lowers the affective filter further, right? Because being a language learner, especially in an ESL class or in a regular classroom where most of the kids are fluent, right? We have a lot of self-doubt and self-consciousness. So just kind of bringing the energy is helpful as well for the students and the confidence. I'm going to pause there and see if there's any thoughts or comments on any of this information shared. I know our time is pretty much just about up, so I'm going to move us into the final stages. Hopefully this will help you think more about the planning process, especially virtual versus in person. I know, because I've been doing this virtual stuff, that it requires incredible planning and then delivery, right? There's a lot to be done there. But I also want us to leave with the idea that maybe we need to teach our students some language learning strategies, right? You don't know what you don't know. So it's really helpful. We do all the hard work on the teaching side. Let's help the students know what they can do on the learning side. And then finally, we all know, you live it every day. There's a heightened need for appropriate and sufficient scaffolding for English learners in these virtual classrooms, right? Because without it, they will not access. Even with it, it's going to be tough to access the content and engage in it meaningfully. So all that being said, I'm going to see if we did our objectives. You guys did an awesome job. Thanks again on the science lesson. And we identified some teacher techniques and learner strategies. Monica, do you want to share the handout in the chat? Is that the way you're going to do that today?
Yes.
Awesome. And the handout, I just want to show you real fast before you head out the door. I should be able to pull it up. I'm trying to show you just all that it has on it, just to see. So this handout has a T-chart, and it's got everything that we talked about, things that you might have talked about in your small group, your breakout room that we didn't get to, and maybe things that you didn't come up today. So it is a list of teacher and student learning strategies for you to kind of look at, share, and mull upon. So all of that being said, I think we're done for the day. I welcome you guys to contact me by my email address. I can pull that up and put it on the screen if you'd like. And otherwise, I'm gonna let Monica do her closing comments, and I thank each and every one of you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kennedy, for joining us. It was such a special opportunity to be able to experience, a lesson through the eyes of an English language learner. So thank you so much. I think it gives us a lot to think about with our own instruction and how we can make those simple changes to make it more accessible to English language learners. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us. If you are interested in signing up for other New York State TESOL upcoming events, just go to our website, and I will also email all of the participants that document as well, in case you weren't able to click on it in the chat. I can email that to you as well. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the week and a great 2021 as well.
Thank you. You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, you too.
Monica.